Retail is now going absolutely crazy over the stablecoin bill. Polymarket users predict an 89% chance the stablecoin bill Genius Act will be signed into law in 2025. The biggest thing that a lot of people are just not questioning is what could this really mean for stablecoins like Tether? For years and years and years, we heard about Tether, right? Tether is going to collapse. It's going to implode. It's going to take the entire crypto market with it. This is going to be much bigger than this and that. And all right, we've been hearing about it. And in fact, we've been hearing about it for almost a decade now. And we really haven't witnessed anything happen with Tether. Now, the big question here is, will anything happen with Tether? Because what we've, really kind of come to know is that Tether is actually one of the largest holders of US treasuries. And that could be a big problem for the US if all of a sudden Tether goes belly up. So the question is, did Tether buy protection? And was that part of their plan? Well, in this video, I really want to go over a lot of things around Tether, but I also want to put a spotlight on RLUSD with Ripple and of course XRP. So let's dive on in. Number one, let's actually talk about what RLUSD has been doing. So big shout out to Ben Grossman for this. We have here, nice job, Ripple team. RLUSD stablecoin nears $500 million TVL. The big news here is that Ondo Finance just brought their short-term US Treasury fund, OUSG, to the XRP ledger. Here's the kicker. They're using RLUSD for all the minting and redemption work. Now, as we really think about this, right, Ondo is definitely a huge player. We know Ben is actually the marketing guy behind Ondo, but what's crazy about this is, RLUSD and the XRP-L are directly tied into this. When we think about RLUSD, though, most of the RLUSD is on Ethereum. In fact, 362.8 million of RLUSD is on Ethereum, 37.4 million is on the XRP ledger. But the crazy thing about this is that most of the holders, in fact, 29.4K of them are on the XRP ledger compared to 3,000 that are on Ethereum. So what gives? But the main thing that I'm actually looking at is the amount of market cap that RLUSD does have tied to it, and also the monthly transfer volume, because this is actually giving us an insight on how successful RLUSD is becoming. RLUSD does have over $400 million tied to it in market cap, 41.43% up in the last 30 days, and monthly transfer volume, 2.5 billion, up almost 50% in the last 30 days, which tells us that, and if we actually look at the transfer volume here, we're starting to see some increased RLUSD activity. Now, could this be from all of the major moves that, Ripple has been making, including with the XRP ledger with players like Ondo? Definitely could, right? But on top of this, right, the main thing is that most of this is Ethereum based. So the question is, are we just starting to see RLUSD being utilized around DeFi pools and, protocols on Ethereum? That could also be the case. But it's hard to tell right now. But on top of this $400 million, we actually know that this is incorrect. RWA.xyz is not tracking this correctly, because if we actually go over here to RLUSD on CoinMarketCap, we're actually floating right around 400 and almost 30 million RLUSD, which also tells us that RLUSD is growing significantly faster than we thought before. And they just minted 13 million RLUSD just recently. And if we actually look at USD stablecoins and we look at the list, well, RLUSD is quickly moving up the list. I do question how long it's going to take for RLUSD to really hit 500 million. And then from there, 1 billion. I think that it happens a lot faster than what most people think. But also when we think about RLUSD, obviously the big thing comes to mind is, what about XRP and the XRPL? The XRP ledger is also starting to see some increased growth around the stablecoin market, as well as RWA value. Also, right now, there's only one stablecoin that they're actually looking at when it comes to the XRP ledger, which is, of course, RLUSD. But the question here is, when are we going to see all of the other ones tracked? Because we also know that 5 more stablecoins just got added to the XRP ledger, including, of course, USDC. Now, this one I'm actually very excited about, because if we think about stablecoins, and if we actually go back to the stablecoin list and we go to Circle, so We know that there's a very large amount of USDC out there, 59 billion to be exact. And when we're looking at USDC, okay, we could see all of the monthly transfer volume here. I mean, the transfer volume is crazy. It's at almost $1 trillion in monthly transfer volume. This is actually down 4.74%, by the way. But we could see the amount of holders, we could see the monthly active addresses and the market cap around it, and the networks in which USDC is listed on. Now, if we actually look at this list, most of the USDC out there is on Ethereum at this current moment. Now, when we think about Ethereum, the main reason why Ethereum is the house of stablecoins it's mainly because of the DeFi protocols that Ethereum does house, which is like majority of the DeFi space. So I do think that once we start to kind of see the EVM sidechains go live on some of these networks like the XRP Ledger, I think that that's when we'll actually start to see more stablecoins flooding into those networks, like of course the XRP Ledger as well, which will be very exciting. But I do question how fast XRP is going to move up this list when we're really kind of looking at this, and most of these networks have like sub 100 million USDC. Right now, the XRP Ledger, in terms of ROUSD, has about 37.4 million tied to it. When we think about that, that would quickly move it up the list above Aptos and, Cello, ZK Sync Era, near Aptos, Mantra as well. So again, I do think that the USDC integration on the XRP Ledger is also very exciting. And of course, it does involve a lot of things around DeFi payments and even institutional DeFi. But now let's actually focus on Tether, right? Because we know Tether is massive. I mean, 150 some billion dollars tied to it. Again, if we're looking at stablecoins themselves, let's go back to the stablecoin list. Tether is number one. I think everyone already knows that. But look at the monthly transfer volume. It's over $1 trillion. There's 14 million plus active addresses, 101, almost 102 million holders. I mean, Tether is massive. It's a giant, right? Most of the supply is actually on Tron outside of Ethereum. But these are like the two dominating networks of, Tether. But for the longest time, Tether has always been talked about as it being a big scam or, a Ponzi scheme for Bitcoin. Now, nobody was able to actually fully prove this. And the main thing that everyone really kind of hates about Tether is the one-to-one backing. They actually scold Tether for not having a full-on 100% clear and, transparent audit. They keep saying that they're going to, but we never actually got to see that. And they've been saying this for years, by the way. But what's crazy is that recently Anthony Pompliano had the CEO of Tether on his channel to do an interview, and he said great things, right? The CEO of Tether believes his business is worth $2 trillion. That number may sound crazy, but Tether is the most profitable company per employee in human history. Then he goes on to just talk about exactly what he sat down and addressed. Now, again, from this, there was a few things that people kind of started to point out. Number one, from Jacob King, we have all Bitcoin maxis know deep down that Tether is the greatest scam in history. Pompliano used to call it out, but now Tether is one of the biggest investors in his podcast and fund. Tether is buying out the crypto voices to deceive the public. Don't fall for all of it. Here we have Tether is the biggest racket ever. Highly doubt it is actually pegged one-to-one. And this was back in 2017. Again, this is at a time where everyone started to actually look at Tether and say, this is actually very interesting. Where's the transparent breakdown of their one-to-one backing? Because we have yet to see it, and it's been almost 10 years. Now, also, what was very surprising was recently the CEO also sat down on Squawk Box and discussed the Senate passing the Genius Act. And one individual from the XRP community, Riz XRP, started to share some clips. And we have Tether CEO seems very shady every time that I hear him talk. Definitely not transparent like USDC and ROUSD. Check this out.
I got a different question. We always talk about just the dollar. And this goes to maybe the Treasury issue, but just the dollar, the primacy of the dollar. And there are folks in this White House who talk about how they love crypto, but they also love the dollar. Do you think that ultimately when it's Bitcoin or crypto more broadly is ultimately going to have a benefit to the dollar long term or undermines the dollar? And given that I don't think you're an American, you may not have a stake in this argument.
Well, I have a stake in the interest of stability for all the emerging markets where we operate, right? So definitely I know that there are concerns on the increase of debt of the United States, but think about the fact that United States are by far still the safest country when it comes to, their national currency and your national currency. Right. So if you compare, everything is relative in life. And think about Argentina, think about Brazil or Turkey and Vietnam and so on, and Nigeria. So by far, the US dollar is the safest fiat currency in the world. And I think that stable coins that were born through crypto are the living proof that actually a combination between Bitcoin, I would not say crypto in general. I love Bitcoin. I think that Bitcoin is completely different than crypto and the rest of crypto. So between Bitcoin and stable coins, they will make America stronger. And that, I think, is the main point of this administration. With stablecoins, we are bringing the US dollar to 420 million people around emerging markets, developing countries, and at an unprecedented pace. We grow by 30 million new wallets per quarter. We are the biggest factor in the expansion of the US dollar hegemony. So that is something very important, apart from buying back the US Treasury. And by the way, Tether invested in the last 3 years back around $5 billion in the US. So we are, I think, one of the biggest promoters of the United States and the United States dollar. Plus, on top of that, we use Bitcoin as a way to create a stronger savings account for and explain how that could be beneficial also for Americans. In the end, is like Bitcoin is the new gold and is understood by people as an edge. I'm not saying that you should have 100% of your portfolio maybe in Bitcoin, but definitely is a good option to have in your portfolio.
Now, on top of this, we also got this clip over here as well. And check this one out.
Will this bill pass? That's the question. Polymarket's giving it an 82% chance right now.
And by the way, this is from Bankless. This is them addressing the Genius Act, along with, of course, Tether. Listen closely to this one.
Now, which is pretty good. I mean, there's some question, though. What does this mean for some established stablecoins? Obviously, this is very bullish for Circle. How about Tether, though? Because Tether's kind of the stepchild of stablecoins, right? It's like offshore. It's got this reputation of maybe like being used from criminals and is, a bit maybe nefarious. It's certainly not a domestic asset. So what happens to Tether in this bill?
I would say just kind of reading but his body language and some of his answers when we asked him about the Genius Act, Paulo is indifferent. I think Tether is...
That was your take?
I think Tether is so large that Paulo's like, I don't care. I'm the 18th largest treasury owner. I am sitting shoulder to shoulder with countries.
Like I already won?
I'm the 5th largest treasury purchaser in the last 12 months. I don't care. Like, the Genius Act is interesting to me. I'm going to issue my domestic United States flavor of Tether just to be in that market. But like, I'm so large that I'm bigger than the Genius Act. That was my takeaway from Paulo.
He's just completely unaffected. I can totally see that interpretation. I mean, like mechanically in the Genius Act, what it means is that if USDC does nothing right now, okay, within 3 years, it will be completely banned from the US. So no crypto exchange can list it. All right. No bank can kind of service it. It's out of here. It's out of here. Now, there is an opportunity for Tether to acquire an OCC license. And Paulo told us, yeah, we're planning to do that. And he also told us they're planning to do a domestic onshore US-based stablecoin too. Right. So they still want to do both and pursue both at the same time. And it seems to me, he thinks that the big use for stablecoins is actually not in the US banking. It's not domestic at all. It's not in the US banking system.
It's foreign.
Yeah, it's foreign. It's for everybody that doesn't currently have access to a US bank, right? And so he thinks that Tether is best positioned to capitalize on that market, whether it gets through the OCC license under the Genius Act or not.
It does kind of bifurcate Circle from Tether in the sense that Circle is for domestic payments and Tether is for foreign like crypto dollars, like a euro dollar. It is the new euro dollar market. And that's not necessarily for payments. It's for reserves. It's like a savings vehicle. It's for bank deposits in foreign banks. It's for individual deposits in the Tether bank account on whatever blockchain they use. And so very different outcomes, I think, even though the end up product is kind of the same.
Now, I don't believe that is the case necessarily where like we're going to use Tether for, offshore transactions and we're just going to tap into Circle for, onshore transactions. The main thing that we're actually looking at here is how does Tether stand with USDC and RLUSD? And ultimately speaking, it doesn't, right? It doesn't have the same overall clarity, right, tied to it. And when I say clarity, I more so mean the transparent reports that come out, monthly for RLUSD, and how Circle is fully audited and so is RLUSD. Like, we don't have that clarity. We don't have that transparency. And the big thing that we're also looking at is the New York Department of Financial Services giving the green light to, RLUSD and also USDC. These are huge steps. And that's why we also look at the audits, right? Because we also have over here from CNBC, the audits are important, the rails. Check this out.
Focus on just the risks in the system, because actually now as this business is really growing, we were speaking to the CEO of Tether before. Obviously, people have been demanding more transparency from that company, for example, for a long time. Where are the risks in the system, to the extent there are some that we should be thinking and concerned about, if at all?
Well, look, I think some of the risks exist in the same banking system, right? Let's have audits. If you talk about USDC, which is a large stable coin, after Tether, it's the second largest market cap. I mean, you're talking about two issuers, Coinbase and Circle. Those are public companies. They're audited by Big Four accounting firms. So let's see, and if companies are going to stay private, let's see the audits happen every year. And I think, I'm not sure about Tether, but I do believe they have a board. Do they have an audit and risk committee? I'm not sure. You'd have to, when you have Paulo on next time, you'll have to ask those questions. And those are the questions I would be asking. But I know with respect to USDC, I've been familiar with Circle and with Coinbase for a long time. And, when I served on the board of Coinbase, I saw those audit reports, and I saw the procedures and processes in place. And again, I think that's where not all stablecoins, and not all stablecoins are created equal. I can really speak mostly to USDC, given my history and experience, but there are other great stablecoins out there. And I know that others are in the works too. Paxos has one also, for example. And we'll see others emerge, I suspect. A lot of people talk about the market opportunity, Andrew, of just yours. But as I mentioned, there's the orchestration layer, also plays an important role. Kind of think of it as Grand Central Station, the rails. That's a really important piece of this all too. And what kind of companies are those? I mean, we saw Stripe just acquire Bridge for $1 billion. And Bridge is not the only game in town, right? We also have, for example, BVNK. That's another orchestrator for the stablecoin space. And I think the reason that you're seeing a lot of new entrants is because the market opportunity is so big.
And, this is something that is very surprising to me. This is on national television, conversations of, you should really ask Tether these questions. What I find crazy about all of this is that we're now getting legislation, right? We're getting clarity for stablecoins at a time where these questions are still coming up around Tether. And see, this is where things get very tricky, because these are the questions that should have been asked 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when Tether was just becoming, a big deal in crypto. Today, it is a massive stablecoin. Some call it a $2 trillion business. Some say that Tether is much larger than Circle, and Circle just had its IPO. Ryan, actually from Bankless, did put out a great post saying, is Tether the world's most valuable company? Tether made $13.7 billion in profit last year. Tether CEO says it will be higher this year. Circle trades at a 270x earnings multiple. Apply 270x to Tether, that's worth $3.7 trillion. More than Microsoft, Nvidia, Apple. That would be number one. We're talking about a $3.7 trillion valuation and possibly a ticking time bomb, with legislation finally becoming a reality. Remember that MiCA over in the EU blacklisted Tether. Now we're getting legislation in the US. With the US and the EU market getting cut off from Tether, The question is, where does USDT go from there? And what type of reaction will this cause to USDT and for the market? These are things that are completely out of the unknown, and I do think that we need to prepare for this, especially at a time where stablecoin legislation could happen within the next 6 months. A lot of people predict that it could happen in the next month or so. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, definitely leave a like, subscribe, to notifications on because more free content. You guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord in the description below. And with that being said, guys, Nick, thanks for watching. Peace out.